welcome to the Secret Restaurant Podcast. I will be your host for this journey through space and time. My name is Nate Hoyle. First and foremost, something that I haven't been talking about on these podcasts, probably primarily because I didn't do one for a long time, but also I think I was trying to protect the truth and the hopefulness of the Miami Redhawks basketball this year. People probably maybe know I went to grad school there for my MFA in poetry. So I lived in Oxford for 2 years. And just like anything I do, if I move somewhere, I develop an appreciation for their sporting teams, but also just for the place in general. So Miami was no exception. I liked following their football team. Didn't go to any basketball games while I was at school there. But the unfortunate truth is I attended their program from 2019, fall of 2019 to spring of 2021. And so in my first year there was actually when COVID lockdown happened. So it's not like it would have been impossible for me to see a basketball game. I did see, I think, 2 of their hockey games there. And the hockey, I think probably still, but then it was like that was like the big sport everyone went to, was hockey. And they would have like different chants, and it seemed like the students would go there. I went to football games too, and those were not as populated. Actually, I lived by the stadium for the football stadium, and I remember kind of being surprised that after going to the University of Iowa for undergrad, where it's like on college football, tailgating is such like a big deal there. And like you go walking around Iowa City when there's a football game, it's like people literally have their own vehicles and their own schemes and their own ways that they go about tailgating their parking spots, the way they set up. And it's just like a massive, massive crowd every time there's a home game. Which truthfully, Iowa in general, I think that there's a lot of college sports that is kind of the culture there. But Iowa Hawkeye football, I'm kind of getting off topic what I wanted to talk about, but Iowa Hawkeye football is like Iowa doesn't have a professional team anyway, so like their University of Iowa or Iowa State sports is like a huge deal to people in the state. Also, I just think like it's a tradition to tailgate. Obviously, there's other schools that do it, but I was kind of surprised when going to Miami that living next to the football stadium, it was like nobody was tailgating, actually, like 0 people were. When I don't know, in my mind, I was always like, oh, everything must be like Kinnick, which is Iowa's football stadium. So while I was there, probably the closest thing was the hockey games. I'm not sure if they sold out the stands because I can't actually remember. But all I know is it was like those games were packed. And I try not to think about, because obviously just telling people what they already know, lockdown happened in like late March. So technically that had been one basketball season up until March Madness, and it has been one hockey season, I would imagine, one football season. But the second year, none of that stuff was happening. And so I try not to think about that too much because, I don't know, there's no point of like complaining about it. And I was like already like a 27-year-old, 28-year-old, so it's not exactly like people who were supposed to be in undergrad and having like their glory years there, you know. I can't really complain seeing as my lockdown was not, if my lockdown had been happening when I was a undergrad student or even like in my early 20s, that would have been way worse than just having it be when I was 27, 28 and should be learning how to grow up. But that's not to say, you know, living on campus and walking around campus with my mask on and being super paranoid, I wouldn't walk down the street where there were like 5 house parties going on of all the undergrads not having a care in the world, which, you know, looking back, probably doesn't matter. It's probably good that they had a different attitude than me, I guess. But, you know, I was still going to friends' places in my grad program and still getting drunk all the time and still socializing in that way. But, you know, when you're young, that's the time that you go to the house parties that terrify those who are outsiders to it. Yeah, congratulations to the Miami Redhawks basketball. Both teams. the men's and women's teams. Well, I researched just before recording this that the women's team also did make March Madness and had a good season. So congratulations to them. But I was reserving I would post the Miami Redhawks men's team. Long story short, went undefeated during their regular season, and I resisted the urge to be talking about it on this podcast, probably for a few reasons. Later on, probably to not jinx it or not be like, oh, look at this team, and then like you talk about it one time and then like they lose or something, you know. But also like in the beginning of the season when they were just winning their first games, like the attention wasn't really the same on them. And so a lot of the games weren't actually available on any of the things that I had. Like a lot of them were on ESPN Plus, which I didn't have access to. But then as their undefeated season continued to remain undefeated, how do you say that? As their undefeatedness continued to remain without defeat, then I think they actually started having some more and more interest by larger broadcasters, and then I actually was able to watch maybe 4 or 5 games in that season. And then they did make March Madness, and then they lost. I don't know if they had maybe a game they had to win to get into the tournament, or the first game they played was technically the tournament. So they either won one game and then lost one, or maybe the first one was a qualifier. I'm not sure. But anyway, a lot of negative people out there online talking about like giving the team a hard time, or talking about they don't deserve the celebration people are giving them. And, you know, there's always going to be people doing that stuff, and kind of bullshit, annoying. I'm sure a lot of them are like grown men who are like fucking commenting on Facebook, like talking about literally student athletes who are working their ass off and have achieved more than these people commenting could ever fucking imagine. And they're like, well, welcome to the big league. It's like, dude, why don't you just go click on a different clickbait that you're probably believing some gullible bullshit. You can click on that, comment on that instead. Outside of the internet, though, because the internet doesn't matter, and it's probably better that the less people who look at the internet's comments and the things being said about things on the internet, the better. Less people do that, the better. I did hear on the internet and on the TV and whatnot that it was really an exciting place, an exciting time to be in Oxford that season, and I can imagine it. I can picture it now. Haven't been back there since I was in school there. Or no, I went back a couple of times to visit, like in the following year maybe, but it's been a few years since then. I don't really know anyone there except maybe like a few teachers. Also, side note, I did some brewing today. I brew beer. If you haven't listened to this whole podcast, which why would you? But I do brew beer with a good friend of mine, and we've been doing a bunch of different styles. And I had to wake up at like 8 a.m. to start washing bottles in a dishwasher to sanitize them, and I had to start boiling 3 gallons of water, which takes forever. And that being said, I did have some beverages, so I'm sorry if I seem a little sleepy, and I feel like I'm kind of mumbling a little bit, but I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are too. I hope you're having a great time listening to the Secret Restaurant podcast. Yeah, second school post my graduation, that there was kind of a event of excitement revolving around basketball. I mean, I went to Iowa, so I didn't go to Iowa City when any of the Caitlin Clark fanatics. I'm watching this cat, and she literally just like burped right in front of where my phone is. So that was hilarious. That was not me. But yeah, Oxford. I obviously it wasn't the same level of craziness as like the Caitlin Clark fanatic craziness. But it's just interesting to think about those. I always think about, like, because I've been there and I know like the capacity which these areas can handle large crowds, and Iowa City obviously can handle large crowds, but not really like world news level. Like it's smaller than my hometown. Like in Davenport, Iowa City is smaller than Davenport. But Oxford is like tiny, and I imagine a lot of the publicity, especially in combination with all the hate that they were receiving from people who didn't know what they were talking about, or just were basically assholes or bad people, basically. If you ever been to Oxford, Ohio, it's like a really small college town. Like there's not really anything else other than the college town. And to get there, you pretty much have to drive on like farm highways, like really hilly 2-lane highways. And then sometimes if you get taken on a certain route, it's like the highways don't even have lines on them. They're just like concrete. It's like crazy. I do remember when I first visited the school, I went and visited with a friend of mine because he was actually the one who told me they have a MFA program. And my goal basically to get into school was that I wanted to get into a program that was fully funded so you didn't have to pay tuition, and then also that you got a stipend for teaching. And so then he was giving me all these schools because he did better research than me. I'm not very good at researching these things. Usually for me with research, my research involves the first one I find. I'm like, that seems perfect. So it's good to have people on your side who can actually sit down and be like, well, actually, there's like a lot of different options. But basically, he went with me to visit because I had gotten accepted. And I just remember driving for the first time there. And it's like so, like the hilliness in Ohio and rural Ohio is like wild. It's like towering waves almost. And like all the hills are like your car will disappear. Like the car in front of you will like disappear under the hill. Or like if you're going up a hill, you won't know whether or not there will be like some truck like flying by the other direction. People kind of talk shit about Ohio, but I had a nice time. It is actually, I mean, obviously it's not like going to like the beach in California or some shit. But it is like very beautiful there. It's very green and it's very like rolling hills. As I mentioned like 4 times already. And Cincinnati's cool. I got to visit Cincinnati. Once again, as I mentioned, COVID happened, but I think I either went to one Reds game, Cincinnati Reds game, or I might have gone to 2, but I do know that once I moved there and I had my live TV, and I was obviously watching a lot of Cubs that year, I moved and then my location settings reset my live TV to where I could only watch Cincinnati Reds games, which was kind of hilarious because they did actually play the Cubs. And I had seen them playing the Cubs earlier in the season. I moved there in like July or whatever. And then all of a sudden I could only watch Reds games. It was like a sick betrayal, you know. You ever feel like when you're talking about something and then like all of a sudden like your brain has a decision to go one way or the other, and then both you could talk about and you want to talk about both. And so you're like, all right, I'll just go this way first and I'll remember the other way and I can bring it up in the future. But then the other way is forgotten forever. I feel like that happens a lot when I'm recording these things. Suppose since this is the Secret Restaurant podcast, I should mention some secret restaurant related things. And funny enough, I'm like maybe 3 weeks overdue. I wanted to do an episode that was the 2-year anniversary of my first Secret Restaurant podcast episode, which was late February. But the time is come and gone, and just like that, it felt like it was just the beginning of March, and now it is almost the end of March. And the reason that I pay so close attention to these parts of the month, places in the month, early in the month, late in the month, is because of my various bills and charges, which are fastly approaching, and they're staring me dead in the eye as April is just ready to pounce on me and beat the shit out of me and maybe even kill. Nah, but I got, so, I can't remember if I said this on here. Oh, wait, no, I jumped topics 100%. So, yeah, 2 years of Secret Restaurant podcast. And I feel like I had a burst of creativity last summer for some odd reason, which probably has something to do with manic depressive disorder. And so I guess we have that to look forward to. But basically, I do feel like even though it's been 2 years or whatever, I don't even really feel like that's an accurate timeline. I feel like when I did even the first like 20 of them, 30 of them, it wasn't even really a podcast yet. It was more like I was trying to start a podcast the whole time. I'm just coming up with this now. It's like I kept starting my phone, and then like I was getting ready to start a podcast, and then that segment would end. And then like I'd pick up my phone again. I'd be ready to start it, keep ready to start it. 20 minutes go by, stop it, pick it up again. Episode 3. Oh, let's see, getting ready to start it. So it probably did take me like a year already just to even get into the groove of even knowing what the hell I'm doing. And the reality is the way that life goes, 1 year from today, I will probably be saying the same exact thing. I will probably be saying that right now I am just revving up and getting ready to start my very first episode of the Secret Restaurant Podcast. So I hope you tune in, no matter when that might be, no matter how far off in the distance of the audio waves of time. Announcement number 2 is that the third release of the Secret Restaurant periodical breakfast, it's almost put together. It's kind of had a bit of a delay for various life reasons, including that I'm releasing my own book because selfishly, what's most important to me is not me printing all of your shit free of charge and mailing you books for free and promoting your stuff for free. It is actually for me to write my own work and try and make people buy it and basically guilt them into buying it, which is what I'm doing right now. But yeah, Secret Restaurant, constant contributor, columnist, writer, Chicago affiliate, Chicago comrade, and probably one of the most supportive people of the press overall, honestly. I could probably count the amount of people on one hand who have been as encouraging as Evan, and also a great friend of mine. He did the editing of this 3rd issue, which is the first time I've ever done that. It's always been I take on the task of doing everything, and he offered to format the inside of the book, and it is coming together. It's not done yet, but I anticipate maybe within the next month I'll have a release date. So if you've been wondering, if you've been asking me about it, messaging me wondering when I'm going to print it, that is the answer. Do you ever wonder, like, when the Pringles company first started, like they first started making Pringles chips, do you think that they had like all their chips like ready to go, but they didn't have any bags for them? But like they had a bunch of tubes that were supposed to be for tennis balls. So they were just like, let's just use these tubes instead. You know what I mean? And maybe the tube had like a picture of a tennis ball on it, and they're like, well, we can't put chips in the tube with like a tennis ball on it. They'd be like, well, let's just draw like a mustache on the tennis ball, and it looks like a little guy on it. Shout out Mitch Hedberg. Shout out Mitch Hedberg for that one, dude. Hey, you ever think like maybe the chicken crossed the road, like, but it never meant to in the first place? Like, we're always asking, like, why did the chicken cross the road? But maybe we shouldn't be asking why. Because maybe the chicken didn't know why anyway. You know what I mean? Maybe, now hear me out, this is, like, probably a more likely situation. Maybe the chicken was only crossing the road because it had just gotten its head cut off. And it was just, like, running around, like, with its head cut off. You know what I mean? Like, why the hell would a chicken know why? That's the real question. Secret Restaurant Publishing presents Why Would a Chicken Know Why? Coming to theaters, spring 2039. You think that the first person who built a piano actually knew how to play it? Or do you think that they just made someone else learn how to play it? Like the family tree of the piano is like this first person made a piano, and then they were done. They're like, I've done enough. Like, why would you have to invent the first piano and then have to go about learning how to play the piano? Like, I feel like if you make a piano, invent a piano, that should be enough. And then it's like imagine like someone built a piano and then like you just were in the wrong place at the wrong time and they're standing there and they're like, learn it. Talk about some television, I suppose. Yeah, I wonder. Okay, so you know what's the trend of this podcast? It's kind of corny. It's like a lot of times I'll talk about things and say that I'm going to talk about them later. And I do. I admit. I hear your complaints about that. I know that you've been complaining about that. I know it's a problem. I'm going to be better about it. But this time, I think I'm going to mention that I watched the 3-part documentary music series, and I had never literally seen it before, and it like kind of absorbed my mind. It's called The Decline of Western Civilization, and basically it's like one filmmaker, she made 3 documentaries about the music scene in Los Angeles, or specific niches of it. So one of them was 78, 79, 80 in LA, of the punk scene, like super DIY, super chaotic punk scene. And then the second one was like 8 years later, which the LA music scene had exploded into like the glam and hair metal scene. And then finally, in the late 90s, she returned to film the 3rd installment of The Decline of Western Civilization, which revolved around kind of the start of pop punk almost, like Green Day and stuff. But the actual film itself, although there were bands in it, the actual like interviews and storytelling actually revolved more around like homeless youths in LA, and they were referred to as like quote unquote gutter punks. So they were basically like kind of drifter youths who were essentially homeless, and that one kind of almost drifted away from music entirely, I would say. No pun intended, drifted away from music. But I'm bringing it up now because it's on my notes, but I'm already 22 minutes into this, and I think if I were to just try and talk about all 3 movies at once, unfiltered, I would end up just like speaking gibberish. So it's definitely something that I'm going to discuss, but I just want to say that it really did kind of affect me almost like emotionally. I'd listened to the bands before. I'd seen 2 of the bands in the trilogy live, at least, unless I'm forgetting any. And I don't know. It's just like a very gritty documentary. It's not like a music documentary where it's like people are reflecting years later about their scene or about how they rose to success. It's literally like she took a camera into these scenes that were like very alternative, not in like the pop easy to use sense, and like literally these were like people on the fringe of society, but it was also revolving around music. And she ended up directing like Wayne's World. She has like a career outside of these documentaries, but they're like kind of infamous, and like they'll make you like remember them. They'll make you like think about them. I feel like I kind of had a few instances like that. I don't know. What do you think comes first? Do you think that art affects your mood, or do you think your mood makes you choose the art, or do you think it's circular? Do you think you need to avoid some art because the effect it will have on your mood, or do you think that it's inevitable that when your mood is bad, you will end up be consuming this music and this art and whatnot? Because just to reiterate, these documentaries, like it's like life is. It's like you watch something. I mean, besides like you watch a movie, it's like, oh, that movie was so exciting, and then you move on from it. Like you watch like a documentary or like even like sometimes even things on like your phone and stuff. It's like you're like living your life and you like watch them, but then all of a sudden like 4 days later you're still fucking thinking about it. I mean, obviously that happens in your real life, but I feel like art, when it happens with art, is like kind of different. Especially if it's something that was like historic too. Like I have no idea what it was like to be alive in like 79. But then I watched that like hour and a half documentary that was literally like just a camera talking to people there and like filming people there. And it was just like strange, you know. I just said like a lot in that last clip. I could hear it when I said it. One thing that I could be more, it's more in my memory. Let's talk about a rock band real quick. Let's talk about a punk rock, or more specifically, post-hardcore. I don't know if people use the term anymore. For a minute, everyone was calling a certain genre of punk and post-hardcore screamo. And I think it kind of meant more so like poetry and kind of strange instrumentals that were like they scream poetry over hardcore instrumentals. But then as like the style of those vocals became widely known, people just started to call like all screaming vocals, whether it be your Cannibal Corpses or whether it be your My Chemical Romances. Anytime someone would use the harsh vocals, they referred to it as screamo. And now I don't know if people even use the term at all, or if it's come to mean something that's more like ironic or something, like in the same way like people shouldn't call the beats beatniks. You know what I mean? Like screamo started out as a real thing, and then it became almost like a way to satirize anything that's like screaming. Anyway, there's a punk rock, post-hardcore, quote-unquote, screamo band from Michigan called La Dispute. And I'm not sure if I've ever talked about them on the podcast. I will say they were probably, I saw them live at a venue in Iowa City called Gabe's. And I was a freshman in undergrad. I had seen a lot of rock shows. I had seen a lot of metal shows. But like seeing them live, it was like, honestly, I had never seen a crowd, an entire crowd, like be that like reckless in a venue before. And it was like 3 bands. Another one was called Balance and Composure, but they're not as like hardcore. They're more like rock and like punk rock and like kind of melodic stuff. And so when they were playing, people were like jamming out. But then when this La Dispute band came on, I literally remember like people were crowd surfing, and like they were getting thrown up so high they were like kicking the lights on the ceiling. And I had been in mosh pits and stuff. I had seen a lot of like extreme bands, but I feel like the energy during their live show, on top of the fact that they were like such great performers in general, it was like mesmerizing to be in that space. Here's one minor note I'll say is like, I discovered them before I went to the show, and I think I've mentioned a few times, like there's kind of a short list that I'm rediscovering now, because I think I've probably been writing definitely poetry and then failing at writing fiction up until the last 2 years. But if you count all that time, I started really trying to write maybe coming up on 15 years ago. And back then, just like I was mentioning with the documentaries, like your life happens and then all of a sudden you don't know what's going to stick with you, or you look back and you realize how much stuff impacted you. I feel like I'm starting to develop a list of like, and it's not a huge one, but a list of like like TV shows and movies and stuff, mostly TV shows because they last longer, like you live with them longer. And then B, like musical acts. And then of course like when you write, you read, and you want to be like the writers. But like a lot of dispute, when I was first starting to write poetry, or when I was first starting to like kind of capture like certain emotions and shit, like that band was like so in my brain. And I feel like when you discover something like early on in like creating what you think like a poem's supposed to be, or what you think like a story's supposed to be, it's almost like you obsess over it intensely, and then you forget about it. But then it's like still like what you're building is still off of that, but then you're like not even thinking about it anymore. And then like years later, you go back and look at it again, and you're like, whoa, like this is exactly where some of these things came from. And I think not necessarily, because a lot of dispute, they'll have stuff that's like first person kind of confessional writing, but they also do a lot of storytelling, and their albums and songs are very conceptual, where like this song is like doing something very specific. So I'm not entirely sure like how to like grasp what I drew from it, except for maybe like voice, and then like intensity, and then also like even maybe like rhythm in like a sentence, and just like an admiration for like artists, and like wanting to be like other artists, and wanting to like also be among these artists and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, their live show, so I already knew about them. I was already listening to them. I was already wanting to be a writer. I was already looking at all these different things and being like, which of these writers do I want to write like, or which of these writers do I even want to keep like listen to, or like being a fan of, or whatever. And so they were definitely one already. And then I think seeing their band live, and especially probably that specific show, because who knows, maybe that was one of the craziest shows. Gabe's as a venue is iconically very cool. So anyway, seeing that show, I never really forgot seeing the show. Like if anybody brought up the band or any of the bands on the venue, I would be like, oh, that was crazy. But I think in the last, like, for some reason, the last couple of months, I like re-listened to one of their albums, and then I just like went in deep, re-listened to everything. And then they came out with a new album late last year. And I'm not gonna lie to you, if you only listen to their music 3-4 of their albums a day for like a week, it kind of puts you in a weird mood. Grand tragedy, first of all. A lot of tragedy in their storytelling. A lot of like hyperbole, a lot of intentional melodrama. But then also just like sonically, the band is just like devastating. Just the sounds, like when you put on their music. If you're not a fan of this music anyway, you'll just be like, oh my God, what is happening? But even if you're a fan of kind of hardcore music or extreme music, punk music, chaotic music, once it absorbs you in, it has a capability of just totally taking over your brain and like putting you in the mood of the song, which is very admirable. And I think that artists like that, you know, that like that talent or being able to do that is like so underappreciated, which it's like, you know, not many people want to get into that headspace anyway, which is probably the biggest problem. But like the capability of like creating something so intense that it takes a person in like that. It's like, I don't really know that many artists that can do that. It is late and I am sleepy, and I am starting to say like way too much. But the last note on that is like, I think, so the album that I saw them play at Gabe's in 2000 and I think 12, it was very early 2012, if not late 2011. But their album that they were touring on was called Wildlife. It was their second full-length album. And I think, I don't like to toss out these kind of generalizations, but I'd probably say it's top 10 albums for me, period. It's their best album, although they have a lot of great music, great albums. But as far as like hardcore goes, extreme music goes, it's absolutely one of the best. and it's mostly storytelling. So it's not like the musicians are badass, and listening to like the lyrics, you can catch good lines and stuff. But it really is like start to finish, like it's a story. The most iconic song on that album has a line in it that's kind of taken out of context, but it is pretty used on like TikTok and whatnot. Or I'm not on TikTok, but Reels and all that stuff. I don't scroll on TikTok. I have one, but anyway, so the song is called King Park, and the line that's taken out of context is about to get dark. But I'm telling you just to A, because you might have heard this part, and B, just to get into like what I'm talking about. Because people take this clip of this line that's literally the end of this story, and the line is spoken from a character in the song. You know, maybe I won't even say it. Maybe you just have to stream it. But because I feel like if I said it, it kind of feels. I don't know if I could say it, like, especially not on the podcast. Anyway, it's called King Park, and it's basically about like a drive-by shooting. I just keep talking about it. Yeah, so like the clip in that people take it out of context is the character in it. He says, "Can I still get into heaven if I kill myself?" And he says it like over and over again. But people take that line out of the whole story. And I feel like if you listen to the whole narrative of it, and also how the band is playing when he's saying it, I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable. It's like goosebumps shit. But they have like their catalog is like full of songs like that are just like, once you actually listen to the story or see how they arranged it, I don't know. I don't think any band has done anything like them, and I don't think that anyone like it sets the bar like very high as far as like art and storytelling goes. This might be the longest solo podcast I've ever done. All right. On that note, on that tragic note, but this is a literature podcast, and tragedy is one of the few genres of literature. And one of the tragedies is that I don't know how many genres are in literature. Maybe that's a comedy of it. All right. You guys take care of yourselves. I will talk to you later.